Yes, ladies and gentlemen, it's a feeding frenzy. Get down into that bat cave and pitch a tent. Everyone wants to get their hands on the Bruce Wang, the Batpole, the newest member of the Justice League, the Bat Manliness. So for those of you who are unaware, DC Comics recently announced their brand new Black Label, which was going to be a line of comic books aimed at an adult audience, featuring adult themes, violence, gore, blood, and nudity. And so in that vein, DC announced their first series in the Black Label would be Batman Damned. Batman Damned, a dark, gritty series. But one announcement they made about Batman Damned, which also happened to be the thing that got them the most attention, was that issue 1 would feature full frontal Bruce Wayne nudity. Yes, that's right, folks. For the first time, people were going to get a look at what Batman had under the hood. It's all the comic book websites were talking about, YouTubers went crazy, but it also got mainstream media attention. Late night talk shows were talking about it, news websites were talking about it. A comic book was actually being talked about in the mainstream news. So I've only recently started getting into comics, and when I heard about it, I decided that Batman Damned was going to be my first series that I was going to buy from issue 1 right when it first came out. The first series I got my hands on was Batman White Knight, but that series came out like a year ago, and so it was kind of a challenge to track down some of the older issues. Batman Damned was going to be issue 1's just coming out, I'm going to go and I'm going to buy it as soon as it's available. And also what I hoped was, because I was buying it right when it came out, I'd be able to pay the actual price on the cover instead of the marked up price that happens when an issue gets older and it's kind of popular. The first comic shop I went to in Toronto, it was sold out. So I went to another one, also sold out. And then I started to get worried. So I went to another comic book shop and I went straight to the racks where all the new releases come from. There weren't any on the shelf, but there was a paper there. If you don't see Batman Damned, ask at the counter. So I go up to the counter and I say, hey, do you guys have Batman Damned? Yep, right here. $80. People are selling them for $150 online. Oh, well, I don't know if I wanted that badly. So I left the comic shop and I went for breakfast. I went on eBay, took a look, and sure enough, they were selling for $150, in some cases more. And as I was sitting there thinking, I'm new to comics. This could kind of be a cool first collectible item to get my hands on. And $80 is a lot, but I feel like that's probably the least it's ever going to cost. So I decided to go back. When I went back, the price had actually gone up. So here it is, Batman Damned, book 1, $85. And Batman Damned, book 1, variant cover, $95. So I picked them up. So the thing that I noticed when I bought these was he had them stacked, behind him on the counter. And when he took mine off the shelf, which was $85, the one behind it was $90. So I guess he just had them stacked in $5 increments. So I don't know what it started at, but when I went in there, it was 80. So he sold one and went up to 85. I guess he had sold one, then 90. And then just about an hour or so later, just out of curiosity, I went back to the shop to see what the price was up to then. And they were sold out. But the thing that made me very happy that I picked up a copy was what I found out later that same day. The presence of Batman's little friend had become so controversial that DC had decided they were going to edit it out in all future printings of the comic and in the digital versions. Now, I'm pretty new to comics, but what I do know is that the thing that drives the value on certain ones is usually their rarity. And in this case, not only does the issue feature the first appearance of a new member, so to speak, but it's also now the first printing is the only appearance of that member. You're never going to be able to find it again. So now I may be wrong, but now I'm pretty certain if you're able to get your hands on a first printing of book 1 of Batman Damned, you've got yourself something that's going to be pretty valuable someday. But the interesting thing for me about all this is speculating about how much of this was planned and how much of it was just real incompetence. Because on the one hand, we obviously know that the first part of it was planned. I mean, the decision to create something called Black Label and aim it at adult audiences and dark themes and edginess and violence and nudity and all that. I mean, we obviously know this was an attempt to court some controversy, to do something new that'll grab some attention, grab some headlines, and hopefully sell comics. But then when I heard that they were planning to edit it out in all future editions, I was of two minds when I think of it. Because on the one hand, part of me thinks, is this just like really awesome 4D chess? Because the decision to edit it out, to make an edit to the actual comic itself in all future editions and in the digital edition, will obviously vastly drive up the value of the first print. And so part of me was wondering if DC had just masterminded the whole thing and thought, yeah, this will be great. It's a perfect way to sell a ton of comics, make sure that these ones sell out, and grab some headlines for comic books. But then I was doing a little bit of research on this thing, and I stumbled upon a video by Nerd Scum, and the guy at Nerd Scum actually works in a comic shop, and he said that they received a message from DC. DC was actually issuing a recall, demanding that they send all the copies of Batman Damned back, and apparently that they would get a fine if they sold any additional copies. And when I heard that, that really made me doubt DC had actually planned everything from the beginning. Because obviously, if you make the decision to edit something out of that first printing, it will guarantee that collectors will want to get their hands on that copy. But if you then issue a recall and call all of those editions back, well, then you're not able to sell them. If you take them all back, collectors can't buy them. Now, I should mention I couldn't find any corroborating evidence or any other mention of a recall being issued except on Nerd Scum. And obviously here in Toronto, they were still selling the issues and making a nice profit on them. So if there actually was a recall, obviously shops just ignored it because they knew they had a feeding frenzy on their hands. But what that all means is, it really means that they purposely did something to be controversial. And then when it was controversial, they were surprised a day later and decided to cancel everything. It just seems really dumb. But all in all, I find the whole thing very amusing, and I got my copies. So now I'm a comic collector, and it's pretty cool. Now, before I close, I do want to quickly talk a little bit about the comic itself. I think the saddest thing about all of this is that this controversy has overshadowed the comic itself. So what do I think of the actual comic? I liked it. I liked it a lot. First of all, the artwork is beautiful. It doesn't look like your average comic. Every page looks like a painting. It's beautiful. Even those tiny panels where it's usually just one guy walking just to sort of move the story along for a second, which usually tend to be the ones that are drawn really quickly and kind of looked at for a second to advance the story before you turn the page. Every single panel is beautifully drawn, beautifully shaded. I really, really like the art style in this book. I think for that alone, it's worth picking up. The story is also really cool. It's got a very cinematic feel. I did find that in terms of the flow of reading it, I found I had to read it slower than I would have to read other comics. I especially found that to be the case with the narration portion of the comic. So the dialogue is your standard white bubbles with black writing in it, and that flows fine. But the narrator, whose text is written in this scrawly white writing, it's very poetic and kind of written in weird language, and I found you really have to pay attention to where they placed commas and things, because it's just written weird. It's not a bad thing, I just found I had to kind of read it carefully, and sometimes because they've split it up into different parts all over the page, I'd have to go back and reread what he was saying so I'd remember what he was talking about. Anyway, plus you're going to want to spend a lot of time on each page because there's so much detail in every panel that you can find yourself just staring at it, which is really nice. The saddest thing about it is the part with the penis is so arbitrary, it's almost unnoticeable. If I didn't know anything about the controversy and I just read the comic, I might have not even noticed that it was there, or if I did, it would have been something like, oh, okay, and you just keep going. I really noticed it because, so I went with a few friends and I was like, oh, I'm gonna go get a comic book today, and apparently it's the first appearance of Bruce Wayne's full frontal. And they were like, oh, really? And these weren't comic people, they just thought it was funny, but they came along with me. And so I bought the comic and I was like, all right, are you ready to see it? They're like, yeah, let's see it. So I flipped through and I found the page. And I remember when I first saw the page, I was really underwhelmed in the sense that I guess because I'd read about the controversy, I was expecting it to be, I don't know what I was expecting. Full, big, giant 2 pages across of just penis. I don't know. But it's in shadow. You barely see it. It's just a tiny little outline. And all of us looked at it and we're like, oh, okay. You know, moving on. So I guess in some ways it is annoying that it overshadowed the comic itself. But then again, if it gets people to buy the comic, awesome. I think you will stick around for the story because I really enjoyed it and I'm looking forward to book 2. The funniest thing I read from DC, the reason they gave was that it didn't advance the story, or it wasn't part of the story. It wasn't central to the storyline. So the implication there is that we're not going to see the Bat member again until it's a central plot point. Is that story coming? It's just a weird thing to say. I mean, can't they just be honest and say, it was controversial, we didn't think it would be controversial, we took it away? They're sitting there being like, oh yeah, you know, we put it in there, and then we're like, why is that there? It's not central to the story. So I guess maybe in book 2, we'll see the Joker's business, but the actual plot line will be like, he's using it to rob banks, and it's been the thing pulling all the strings all along, and it'll have a little smiley face on it as well. And then the more funny thing is, it's weird that that was the controversial item in the comic, when I'm surprised, I'm not going to spoil anything, but there's a lot of religious imagery in the book that I would expect would, you know, offend some Christians if they actually look at it. So it's bizarre that they sort of just, nobody seems to care about that, which is interesting. Anyway, the book's worth checking out, and if you got your hands on the first printing, good for you. Good for me. Anyway, I'll wrap up this video here. Thanks a lot for watching, guys. I'm Scott Dion Brown. And if you like this video, hit that like button. If you'd like to see more, hit that subscribe button. I post videos every week at least. And ring that bell so you get all the notifications. Batman Damned, Book 1. Check it out if you can. I'm Scott Dion Brown. I'll see you guys next time.